It's a Wonderful Life is directed by Frank Capra, starring Jimmy Stewart, Donna Reed, and Lionel Barrymore, telling the story of George Bailey, who works for a loan company in the town of Bedford Falls, New York, keeping Mr. Potter at bay from taking over the town of Bedford Falls and using it for his own corrupt business endeavors. And throughout the narrative, George Bailey manages to realize that he actually does have a good life, and he should be thankful for what he has, despite the fact that he has never been able to accomplish what he wants. Traveling the world, seeing all these great sights throughout the world, always having to give up what he wants for the good of the town that he's living in. It's a Wonderful Life has been talked about, I'm sure, by many people, and it's a must-watch for me every year on Christmas. This film was released in 1946 or 1947, somewhere around that New Year time frame. Initially, it flopped at the box office, but over time, it's managed to gain a huge following. The first time I heard about It's a Wonderful Life was, believe it or not, on a Sesame Street Christmas special, where the background characters were watching the film as it was being played on TV. And at various times throughout the special, you would see it play in the background. And as a kid watching the special, I would see the movie play on the background on TV and think, I wonder what movie that is. The plot of the movie is basically the whole life story of George Bailey and what leads him to the point, which is what mostly people remember it for, how we see him wanting to travel the world and have all these great adventures and having to give all that up, keeping the people from the town that he lives in from falling under the reign of Mr. Potter. The film opens with an in media res of sorts, where George is about to do something really terrible and everybody in the town that knows him is praying to God for his salvation. God and Joseph, the foster father of Jesus, educate this guardian angel, Clarence. That way when he goes down to Earth, he can find a way to help him, therefore earning his wings. We see George as a young boy helping his brother from the ice, stopping Mr. Gower from using poison in a fit of grief, meeting his then future wife, Mary, played by Donna Reed, while dancing on the dance floor above that underground pool.
Buffalo Bills, can't you come out tonight?
What'd you wish when you threw that rock? This is a very interesting situation. And as the film goes on, George's father passes away from a stroke, therefore inheriting the company, continuing to give up certain aspirations that he has, like going to college, giving it to his brother Harry, who becomes an all-American football star. And as the war breaks out, he continues to keep the town of Bedford Falls afloat. Even when he tries to recruit him, he considers it briefly, but then he decides, no, I know what your game is. I'm not falling for that. And for those who don't know, the actor who plays Mr. Potter, Lionel Barrymore, he's the great uncle of famous actress Drew Barrymore. I believe he's the great uncle. I know he's the ancestor. He's the ancestor of Drew Barrymore. We'll just go with that. And through an accident, George loses $8,000 that's needed in order to keep his company afloat, but Mr. Potter finds the money and takes it for himself, finally feeling like he's gained the upper hand on George Bailey. George realizes that his whole life is about to go down the tubes and considers a suicide attempt, only then to have Clarence come in and stop him from doing so. Trying to talk some sense into George, if I hadn't been born, maybe everybody would be better off. And Clarence decides, oh, wait a minute. That's an interesting idea. Let's go with that. And from that point on, for the rest of the movie, it's George realizing what the world would have been like without him. Remarkably, for myself, this movie really has no problems for me. Film is subjective at the end of the day, but I can't really find anything wrong with this movie. You could say, obviously, that it's dated considering the time period it was released in, or the way people talk and dress. The movie has remained timeless because of the message that it's entailing, that you should be happy with what you have and not be so focused on what you don't have. And while there's nothing wrong with having dreams, hopes, and aspirations, it gets to a point where if you go to the exact viewpoint that George Bailey has, it could become really unhealthy for you emotionally and psychologically. It's right up until the sequence where he sees what life would have been like without him. We don't really see the full impact that he has on people. I mean, he is helping the town, and they appreciate him trying to keep Mr. Potter out of their lives, but he doesn't realize until the finale just how much of an impact he's having on those around him. One of the biggest things that elevates this movie is the performances from the actors, and even though the way that they talk is very reminiscent of the 1940s, like the very fast talking, nobody talks like this, see? I'm gonna tell you this thing, I'm gonna smoke the cigarette, get a little bit of liquor. That's definitely there, but alongside of that, the performances are very real. It feels like real characters, real people in real situations. And the reactions that George has when he realizes that his life is gone, it feels very authentic, and Jimmy Stewart plays it to perfection. The one scene that always sticks out in my mind, when he tries to talk to his mother, he runs up towards the camera and looks, and having this really big scared look on his face, and the music starts swelling up, I just got shivers talking about that. Frank Capra brings a really good sense of eeriness to it all, assisted by the musical score from Dmitry Tiomkin. Considering this came out in the 40s, obviously there were no green screen sets, there were no blue screens or anything. They actually built sets, and they considered using cornflakes for snow, but they decided not to because of how much noise that they were going to make. So they used a different type of snow in order to create the needed sound effect in post-production, which gives the film a very good sense of realism to it. And despite this film being 2 hours and 10 minutes, the length is never felt. It never loses steam. The pacing is so fluid that for me, it makes me feel like I'm watching an hour and a half movie. Every scene is relevant to the next one. There's not that one 10 or 15 minute sequence or scene where it feels like, okay, we're kind of dragging through the mud a little bit. Let's get to the main point here. And eventually George realizes that he does really appreciate what he has despite not being able to do what he wanted, and goes to the bridge crying out to God.
I want to live again. I want to live again. I want to live again. Please, God, let me live again.
And the film's finale is one of the best finales I've ever witnessed in cinema. We finally get to see the full impact that he's had on the town. His wife Mary, who was able to figure out what was going on, rounds up everybody in town in order to raise enough money, actually about $25,000, which is more than enough to compensate for his losses. The whole town shows an appreciation for what George has done for them over the years, and he realizes that he actually does have a wonderful life. And I think that speaks volumes to everybody who doesn't really feel like they're making that much of an impact, but if the right circumstances arose, you might actually be surprised by what you manage to do for others. All it takes is one small act, one small saying, can make a huge difference for anybody. Now, I myself don't exactly have what I want. I do have a desire to have a wife and a family one day. I do have my own place, but it's not exactly my own. I do have a roommate. I'm not exactly where I want to be or where I'd like to be, but comparison to where I was about 5-10 years ago, I don't want to settle for less or anything, but it's a lot better than where I was back then. And considering how much I've managed to progress in my life over time, this movie in a lot of ways puts it in perspective for me. And it makes me in a way stop comparing myself to others who do seem to have what I don't have. And in some ways I actually get a reminder whenever I find myself falling into that trap. It's like a voice inside my head saying, you're doing it again, stop it. The prime example of this is when George sees a copy of Tom Sawyer that Clarence is carrying around throughout the movie, and the little note that he wrote for George, where he says, "A man with friends is no failure. People who love you and care about you, if you ask me, it's better than having all the riches in the world." If you haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life, you are missing out. To call it a classic is an understatement. Hopefully I'm not overhyping it, but I actually think I should be, because it's really worth seeing. And even though most of it doesn't take place at Christmas time, in many ways the film actually does what Christmas is supposed to do. Remind you of what you have and be grateful for what you have. It's remained timeless for over 70 years, and I think for the next 100 years or so, and even beyond that, it's going to continue to remain timeless. Those are my thoughts on the film. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you're having a really great Christmas, holiday, winter break, whatever it is you guys celebrate. Either way, hope you're all having a good time and staying safe out there. I'll see you guys in the next video, and happy holidays.